will just this will just give kind of an overview of historical and current sort of debates within the philosophy of values. Um, and so we can start by asking, what do we value as individuals or as communities, and how do we articulate what we value? Is it how we talk, or is it how we act? How do we show that we value something, for example? Um, so yeah, what ways do we value things? And then this is a question in philosophy, and I guess more normative philosophy, like the, the philosophy of should or should not. Are there right and wrong ways to value things, or are there right and wrong values? Are there ways of valuing that are right and wrong? And we can talk about this too. And if I'd love to hear people's thoughts and what you think about this, and then especially thinking always, how does this apply to technology, and especially AI systems? Um, so obviously, we all value our friends, our family, our pets. We value the support, the comfort, the fun we get from them. We value their happiness and their achievements, so we make their happiness our reason for doing stuff. um, like we make their pain our reason for acting sometimes. Like, for example, if a piano fell on my son's foot, I would immediately jump and try to get the piano off his foot, because I value his not suffer. I don't want him to suffer. I value his not suffering. I think everyone can. That's a pretty, relatable thing. Um, yeah. And then we also value our own accomplishments, of course. We value activities and goals that give us meaning and purpose, individually and together. So maybe, I don't know, like if anyone plays in a band or does any like a team sport or anything, you value the togetherness of that experience and the camaraderie and the connection you get to your teammates or your bandmates through a common, trying to achieve a common purpose. And then, of course, we also really value recognition and attention for our achievements. We all want to be seen for what we've accomplished and what we do in the world, and especially by our loved ones. We want this recognition and attention. Um, yeah, sorry, I'm out of sync with the animations, but yeah, those are just some graphic illustrations of what I was saying. Um, of course, we also value our own health and well-being, and the health of well-being of our loved ones. Um, so we value all these things, that like give us strength, that sustain us. We value things that prevent or cure illness, like vaccines, for example, even if they're painful to get. Like, there's a momentary pain, and then you might have side effects. You might have fever, but you value the protection that the vaccine gives you more than the temporary pain or the temporary side effects, because you value your health and your well-being, and you don't want to die. Um, and then we also value actual physical objects like mementos. We value pictures, and you have obviously online, you can see how pictures are hugely valued by people, and especially things that remind us of good times and meaningful events like family occasions or happy times. And then we also value symbols as well, of things that keep you focused maybe on your connection to a religious tradition you might have, or being married, or other sort of social institutions that we value being a part of or participating in. So there's these are physical objects that we value about these other deeper sort of values. Um, and of course, we value happiness and flourishing, however you define that, like living whatever it needs to live a good life. And this was kind of a lot of Aristotle's philosophy was about, what does it mean to live a good life? And he sort of said, well, it's like not just this temporary, fleeting, maybe you get drunk or get high. That's not happiness. Happiness is what the Greeks called eudaimonia or eudaimonia. So it's more of this like meaningful, deep sense of contentment. And it's a matter of being fully alive, fully realizing your talents and your capabilities is when you're in this state. So it's sort of beyond like the temporary high you might get from like watching TikTok or like doing. Oh yeah, go ahead. Does,
Well, I just so because the students have been preparing reading materials where they've learned about the difference between virtues, values, and norms, and like some of it like has been talking about Aristotle and the good life, and that
mhm.
a good life is the life of a person who is virtuous. So the importance of
Yeah,
virtuous values was emphasized. Would you agree with that? That is one part of the question. The other one is like how is there this difference in your opinion between values the way you are defining them, like anything we value versus, let's say, core values, like core values such as like do no harm, that Google, for example, held for a while, like as a guiding principle.
yeah. I mean, I think I'll get to the distinction between instrumental values and
Okay.
ends.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
If there's core, yeah, but I think yeah, like a value like not harming would, would be part of, I think, like virtue ethics, but how you decide on what you include, like how do you know what's virtuous is like kind of the problem, and then that might be situated in a cultural context. Like that might be what's virtuous in one context is not in another, for example. Or like we all might agree like respect is very important, but exactly how you show respect varies greatly among different groups of people. And so in one case, a gesture that might show respect might actually be disrespectful in another context. But like the two, we might all agree that like you should in general show respect, but like the ways you actually do that are totally disagree. People disagree about that. I don't know if that, yeah.
Yeah. So
But
thanks.
well, I'll get to, then we'll talk about monism and pluralism and like core, whether there's a hierarchy of values, for example. Um, yeah. So then, yeah. What else do we value? Art, spirituality, adventure, play, health, justice, morality, hard work, nature. I don't know if people have other, think of other things you value.
Family.
Family, for example. Yeah. There's also, you might not value anything, which is called nihilism. um, so yeah, so these are, and some values we want to maximize, like justice. I think we'd all agree that we want to maximize justice, and we want to minimize other values like racism or maybe patriarchy or something. There's values that we want to change or not have, or we want to minimize them at least. Um, so those are all the types of things we might value. And then what ways do we value? So why do I value X or whatever it is? So there's two ways of interpreting this question. Why do I value something? The first way, you want to know, you're asking a causal question. What causes me to value my family? What causes me to value love? What causes me to value money? Um, for example, why are you all here? Why do you value education? Uh, is it because your parents brought you up this way to believe in the value of education? It's important to go to school. Um, or why do you value monogamous relationships, for example, or not? Maybe people, there's different views of that. Um, and maybe you fear being judged, or you fear not being cool, or you fear being ostracized for not subscribing to a particular norm or value. Um, or for example, you might think it's cool to be different and you want to do something weird, and you actually value that over being accepted by a social group or your family? So the second way of interpreting this question is you could answer, what reasons do I have for valuing whatever it is, love, monogamy, etc. And yeah, X could be knowledge, family, whatever. And you might ask, what makes knowledge, for example, worthy of valuing? What qualifies knowledge as being valuable? And you could say knowledge or education will get me things I want, or it has value in itself. So are you here in this class because you want to get a good job later, or are you here for its own, you just want the knowledge for its own sake? You don't value this for some other purpose. So for example, studying, getting a good education will likely get you more money. And is that why you value education? Or you might become famous by writing books or something. You might find a partner at school. And then you can keep asking, why do you want these things? Are these things just good in themselves? Money, fame, love? Are these, what reasons do you have for valuing those things? If, for example, knowledge is not what you value as an end in itself.
So
So
somebody,
this, oh
sorry,
yeah, this,
somebody asked in
someone
the
has,
chat. I don't know if you can hear me. My volume might be low, but like
yeah.
I tried to interrupt, but somebody asked in the chat, why not both? Two birds, one stone.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly. You can do that. Oh yeah, thanks for why not both? Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's certainly not in all cases. But I think there'll be some examples, like it might be difficult to resolve contradictions that might arise for both. Or if you really, well, we'll talk about monism versus pluralism in a second. I think under pluralism, it's fine to say both. But under monism, they would say, no, there's this hierarchy. And if you really think about it, there are things that you do value more. Um, so, oops. So yeah, this is just in sort of, it's not really jargon, but it's kind of jargony. Like you valuing something instrumentally is when you value it for something else, and valuing or having an end is in itself. And so Kant, famously was, he said you should never value other people as instrumentally. Like you shouldn't use people for your own career. You shouldn't have partners just for sex. Like you should value other human beings as an end. They're valuable just as they are and as an end in themselves. They don't have we shouldn't value humans as instrumental or instrumentally. So you might value these different objects, P sets. It's like also philosophical jargon, but basically valuing something instrumentally is you value it as a means toward an end, knowledge, a degree, a good job. So like there are some things that we really only value instrumentally, like vaccines. I don't think, maybe some people here are, that might have strange interests, but most people don't value vaccines as an end in themselves. It's because they keep us healthy and protect us from disease. So what we really value is health as an end, which also might be an instrumental. And we'll get to this sort of building of this hierarchy. But knowledge, for example, like someone like this could be both. We might really be interested in this course, but we might also really want this course to get a job. Like that, I think that's a case where knowledge is a good example of something you can value both instrumentally as an end in itself. And yeah, so that's and I think most people might share this view of knowledge, for example. But then if you go back to Aristotle and a lot of different other philosophers, the debate has been this hierarchy of ends. So if we ask, why do I value whatever X, we can sometimes find this sort of hierarchy of ends or goals. So I value vaccines because they promote health. I value health so I can continue to gain knowledge. I value knowledge because it makes me happy. I value happiness because happiness is my final end. I value happiness as a good in itself and not as a means to something else. So as you kind of ascend this hierarchy of values, at some point you stop, and there's the final thing that is the end that you're after. Like I value, knowledge, etc. Or you can start somewhere, maybe with something small, but you might end up in this hierarchy of ends where you bottom out, or at the top. I don't know if it's the top or the bottom, but like there's a sort of final end where it's no longer you're valuing it for as a means to something else. It's what it's a good something that's good in it, just in itself. So it might be happiness, might be your family, might be love. And yeah, this was kind of Aristotle's argument. And then, so is there a single final end in terms of which we understand the good of everything else? Is there a scale on which we can rank the goodness of all things? And when we start to think about AI, this is in practice how large AI models have to be tuned, because you have to turn all these different values ultimately into a scalar number, and you have to tell the model what to prioritize. And so we kind of implement this by default without thinking about it. It's this sort of monist view that there's a single scale when you can rank sort of the goodness of the outputs. So that's, yeah. Well, we can talk about that in a bit. And so this came to be known as monism about value. A monist about value holds that there's a single value that explains the value of everything else. Happiness, pleasure, whatever it is all explained by this one single value at the top of this hierarchy. And strong monists, and this is, I don't know that there's any philosophers who are actual strong monists anymore, but claim that this, you can order this on a cardinal scale, like first, second, third, or I mean, 1, 2, 3, like that there are units, and this gets into like utilitarianism. There are units of pleasure or units of utility called utils or hedons, and the intervals between them is like the same distance. So you can rank all these ends, and then you can write them down in an order, and like there's an equal distance between each of these points on the scale. And so in this sense, we can compare values, we can measure them, and we can compare them, which happens to be very convenient for machine learning. Yeah, and so like and maybe if you've been in the hospital at some point, they might do this pain scale for you, where you're like, how do you feel right now? And you're like, I don't know, fine, or I have a pain, and they're like, is it the worst pain you've ever experienced in your life, or doesn't it not hurt at all? And you kind of can put, and so the monist would say there's this type of scale exists for our values. So there's alternatives to strong monism, though. And then this, but the idea that there's a single value that you can measure, and you could develop an algorithm to decide what's best. You could have this weird objective measure of what's best. But a lot of philosophers have criticized this and objected to it, and then so there's weak monism and then pluralism. And so John Stuart Mill, for example, he agreed that, yeah, there's a single value, there's a single way to know what's good and best, but there are different, like, incommensurable ways that this is exemplified. And so we were talking before about like showing respect, for example. There might be the single value of respect, but there's different ways that respect is exemplified. So he and distinguished, there's like these bodily pleasures and intellectual pleasures that have different sort of modalities of exemplifying perhaps the same value. Um, so they're both pleasures, you know what I mean? But you can't really like, is one better than another? Like sometimes yes, sometimes like, or it's hard to say that like on this hierarchy, which one is higher or better. Uh, and then I think this is probably the more common view late, like currently in philosophy, and certainly in machine learning, you have what's called pluralistic value alignment, where people recognize the sort of limitations of having to make these models follow sort of like an average of values, and we should align the models to a like plural, like there isn't just a single value. We might have multiple final ends. There might be multiple things that are good in themselves, like love, knowledge, piety, justice, happiness, and these sometimes pull against each other. Like they're not all on this nice, neat scale where that you can rank. Some are stronger at some times. This oh yeah. Um, but so yeah, you might value knowledge even if maybe you're really busy in school right now and you sacrifice having relationships because you value this education more than the time it would take to develop a relationship. Um, and then you might, I'm sure everyone has families with lots of conflicts and difficulties, but you value your loved ones because even though they make you unhappy, because you value them as good in themselves, like they're a final end. Like you don't have your family to get something else, so you sort of put up with the unhappiness that they cause you. But also, you can think of people who fight, who are convinced or they're fighting for justice, and they might you can think of examples of people who value this sort of abstract value of justice so much that they would sacrifice their well-being. They might even sacrifice their lives because they value justice as such a high good in itself, that nothing is more important than fighting for justice. So you might give up your family, you might join a cause or something, and you might ultimately die in pursuit of this value. But like Camus said, like if there's something for which you're willing to give up your life, isn't that also of excellent reason to live? Like that's kind of what gives your life meaning, the thing that you might ultimately be willing to die for. Um, and so then the debate becomes. Oh, go ahead, Sonia. Sorry,
If
was
you
there?
go back one more time, sorry, to the last slide. I hope you can hear me. So
Yeah,
when it says like I may value justice even if it requires me to sacrifice my well-being. Why is that pluralism? Because like it seems like justice is like the most important value. Wouldn't that be
yeah,
more?
yeah. I think that like I think the monist would like say that justice isn't the most important thing, or it couldn't be, because the ultimate end would be hedonic, or like your own personal well-being. So I think the monist would just say that yeah, I know, it's a good question. Like they would just deny that. They might argue that that's not correct.
Okay,
But the pluralist would say, no, that's fine. Your final end is pursuing just like, and it pulls against the other values of my own well-being, or my life, or being alive.
I see. Okay.
Was there another in the
Yeah,
yeah,
somebody said in the chat, like, isn't justice then more important than health in this case?
yeah, exactly, yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. So people who would, and I don't want, I don't want to say any specific causes or whatever, but there's certainly causes for which people have given up their lives, um, because they think they're pursuing justice. And again, then you can debate, uh, are they really doing that, or what? Pl- yeah, yeah, exactly, right, right. Um, so I think getting to your comment, Norman, about this, are there right and wrong ways to value? And I think going like Kant, for example, argued strongly that there were, but uh, this might not be. Yeah, that's the whole point of philosophy is to debate these things. Um, so if we value something, we can also ask whether it is it right to value it the way we do. So if you're willing to give up your life or sacrifice yourself or even maybe kill other people in the pursuit of justice, is that okay? Is that right? Um, so efforts to determine what is apt to value have probably been part of every human culture. Um, and yeah, this is it. So um, we all are get enculturated and kind of learn what to value by growing up how we grew up in the specific historical socioeconomic circumstances that we did. But this is also part of like pluralism, where each sort of group defines what are the right things to value. um, but there's also better and worse ways to think about value individually and collectively. And this is the subject of like philosophy and like sort of the systematic inquiry. um, so is there such a thing as a moral error? Like, this is a big debate. Is morality objective? Are values objective things? That's the realist stance. The anti-realist stance is that there's no such thing as values. There's no such thing as morals. We just literally invented those things. They don't exist independently of us in any sense. Um, so, for example, if someone loves or values their loved one only instrumentally, only because they give them gifts and flatter them, we might think that they don't really love that person. They don't love them in the right way. They don't see their loved one as truly valuable in themselves. So you only value your partner because they have a lot of money or status or whatever. That would be, and you might argue that that's wrong. It's not really love, for example. Um, so some things such as other people, and this again is the Kantian sort of view, are intrinsically valuable, and it's wrong to treat them as mere means. But again, this I also varies from society to society, culturally. Like for example, where marriage is seen as more of a deal or like an institution, and it's not necessarily about love or whatever. Um, and you can also think of money. Like if you love money as an end, if you organize your life around getting as much money as possible, and not because of the opportunity it provides, but just to have it, you might say about certain billionaires maybe that they're confused about the value of money. So the idea is that money's not valuable in itself. You should only treat it, so money is like, as opposed to love, like you should not treat love instrumentally, but you should treat money instrumentally, because in itself it's just pieces of paper or bits in your bank account or numbers. It's you value it so that you can eat, so that you can have a place to live, so that you can travel, so that you can have clothes, blah 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 blah. But the hoarding of money itself, we all, or I don't know, maybe, but like we might view that as a confused or wrong. Is that an error? If you're just after money for itself. um is that the Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So I don't know, I guess I would leave it open for some discussion. If these are there such things as moral errors? Is morality an objective thing that we can know about? um can you make mistakes when you thinking about values? Can you think of other examples of things that you maybe value as an end in itself or only instrumentally? And I think, yeah.